So here's something I didn't expect to be thinking about. Samsung spent years building variable aperture cameras into their flagships. Then they killed the feature in 2020 because it made phones thicker and more expensive. And now, according to multiple supply chain reports, Apple is about to bring it back. But here's what's actually interesting. Samsung might bring it back too because of Apple. That's not a coincidence. That's a pattern. Let me explain what's happening, because the story isn't the feature. The story is why both companies suddenly think this is worth doing again. Okay, first, the color thing. The iPhone 18 Pro might launch in red. And I know what you're thinking. Red iPhone? We've had those for years. Yes, but also no, here's the distinction. Red iPhones have existed since the iPhone 7, but they were always mid-cycle releases. You'd wait 6 months after launch, then get red as a special edition. The iPhone 8? Same thing. Even the iPhone XR had red at launch, but that wasn't the Pro line. Pro models, they've always played it safe. Forest green, deep purple, muted sophisticated tones that whisper, I spent extra money without screaming it. That changed last September with Cosmic Orange, and now Mark Gurman at Bloomberg is reporting that deep red is the flagship color being tested for the iPhone 18 Pro. At first, this sounded minor to me. Another color, cool. But then I started thinking about the progression. Pro colors used to be about restraint. Now they're getting louder. Orange, now potentially red. That's a shift in positioning. What this tells me is Apple is recalibrating who the Pro customer is. The original Pro buyer was the creative professional who wanted subtlety. The modern Pro buyer might be someone who wants their purchase to be seen. That's a different psychological profile. And strategically, it makes sense. The standard iPhone lineup has been eating the Pro's identity from below. Better cameras, better chips, similar design. The Pro needs to differentiate somehow. Visual distinction is the easiest lever. Gurman also noted that red and orange might be too close on the color wheel to coexist. So if red becomes the hero color, Cosmic Orange might not stick around for a second year. That doesn't look accidental. That looks like a planned rotation to keep the lineup feeling fresh without fundamentally changing the hardware. Now, let's talk about the camera, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting. The iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max are widely expected to feature a variable aperture main camera. Ming-Chi Kuo first reported this in December 2024. A more recent report from October 2025 confirms Apple is moving ahead and discussing components with suppliers. So what is variable aperture? It's a mechanical system, tiny blades inside the lens that physically open and close to control how much light hits the sensor. Dark environment, open it up. Bright environment, close it down. It also gives you control over depth of field. That's the difference between a sharp subject with creamy background, blur, and everything in focus. Sounds great, right? Here's the thing. Apple has never done this before. Every iPhone from the 14 Pro through the 17 Pro has a fixed aperture at f1.78. The lens is always fully open. Apple has been doing all its computational photography magic with a fixed hardware constraint. Samsung did variable aperture years ago. The Galaxy S9 and S10 had it, 2018, 2019, then they dropped it. You know why? Thickness, cost. The feature made the phone thicker and more expensive, and Samsung decided the trade-off wasn't worth it. They moved to fixed aperture cameras and used software to compensate. So here's the question. If Samsung, a company that aggressively chases hardware innovation, couldn't make variable aperture work economically, why does Apple think they can now? This is where it gets interesting. Samsung is reportedly planning to bring variable aperture back. According to reports, they see it as necessary to increase camera competitiveness, and they want to replace software correction with physical hardware again. Let me read that again. Samsung dropped a feature because It was too expensive and made phones too thick. Now they want it back. At the same time, Apple is introducing it. That's not independent decision making. The timing suggests Samsung is reacting to Apple's move. Not because Apple is smarter, but because Apple has a different calculation. Apple controls its supply chain differently. They order components at scale that makes other manufacturers nervous. They're willing to accept margin compression on hardware because their ecosystem revenue is absurd. Samsung doesn't have that same cushion. They're hardware first. Their profits come from moving devices, not services. So when Apple signals they're doing variable aperture, Samsung has two choices. Let Apple own the professional camera hardware narrative or match them and figure out the economics later. They're choosing to match. That doesn't look like a coincidence. That looks like competitive pressure reshaping product strategy. But let's be fair to both sides. Variable aperture isn't magic, it's a tool. And Apple has been doing incredible work with computational photography using fixed hardware, deep fusion, smart HDR photographic styles. They've been compensating for hardware limitations with software intelligence for years. So why add mechanical complexity now? Here's my read. Apple isn't doing this because they need it. They're doing it because the Pro line needs the differentiation. Think about it. The regular iPhone 17 already has a great camera. The 18 will be better. The gap between standard and Pro has been narrowing. That's a problem if you're trying to justify a $200 plus premium. Variable aperture is a hardware feature you can market. It's a spec you can put on a comparison chart. It's something the standard model won't have. That's the play. The feature itself will probably be good. Apple's implementation of hardware is rarely bad, but the strategic purpose isn't just better photos, it's better product segmentation, and that's fine. That's how product lines work. But it's worth understanding the real motivation. This isn't Apple suddenly discovering aperture blades. This is Apple looking at their lineup structure and realizing they need more separation between tiers. Beyond the camera, the iPhone 18 Pro is rumored to have a smaller dynamic island, the A20 chip, longer battery life, a C2 modem, a simplified camera control button, and an N1 wireless chip. Oh, and it's expected to launch alongside Apple's first foldable iPhone. That's the context that matters. Apple is about to introduce a completely new product category. The foldable will be the star of that event. The iPhone 18 Pro needs to hold attention too. A new color strategy, a new camera hardware feature. These are ways to make the annual flagship feel significant even when the real showstopper is something else entirely. That's not a criticism, that's smart product management. So what's the takeaway? On the surface, this is about a red phone and a camera feature. What's actually happening is Apple is evolving the Pro brand to be more visually distinctive while adding hardware differentiation to justify its premium positioning. And Samsung, despite having done this feature first, is now following Apple's lead because the competitive dynamics have shifted. That tells you something about where the power sits in this industry right now. The feature isn't the story, the timing is the story, the pattern is the story, and if you're paying attention, you can see the chess moves happening in real time. Catch you next one. Peace out.